real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Open your mind.
All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Josh. Welcome to the Repill Project's Conversations on the Fringe. We are with you typically every Friday night. This night, I'm looking forward to. We got Laura Lee Skype on with us. Laura Lee is a returning guest. She is a Jungian astrologer and one of the most probably intelligent women I know in my life. She has just opened my eyes to a whole new world of information. So I'm glad to have her here with me tonight. Laura Lee, how are you?
Well, hi, Josh. Thank you. I'm always excited to talk with you and your wonderful audience about something that's actually very frightening and important.
Well, yeah, and you sent me a message, and I looked at it, and I had to read it a few times, and I didn't know too much about this topic, but I was willing to entertain it. So I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. So that's the topic tonight is chemical conspiracy. And if we have time, we'll get into some Jungian astrology, some hidden astrology.
Yes. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of that going on, too, I'll tell you.
Well, there is. There absolutely is. But why don't you just kick it off and talk to me and the audience about this topic that you wanted to bring to our attention?
All right. Well, maybe I can start just by setting the table a little bit here. First of all, I live on a small island off the west coast of Canada. It's one of the most pristine and beautiful places left on Earth. Plus, it's super green. The member of parliament for this area is the leader of the Green Party in Canada. Okay, so this is a super green, super clean place. Well, on May the 4th, our community discovered that we were going to be sprayed from an airplane with a insecticide called 4A48B. Now, this came as an absolute shock to me because I did not know this was going on, nor did a lot of other people in our community. But it turns out that this is happening everywhere on Earth. There is this particular insecticide, 4A48B, is used everywhere on Earth where they are trying to supposedly eradicate something called the spongy moth. It used to be called the gypsy moth, but they had to change the name because it was offensive to gypsies. That's how bizarre this whole thing is. So now they call it the spongy moth. Apparently it's not offensive to sponges. So that's what it is called now. So we heard about this. We heard about it on the 4th, and it was to be happening on May the 6th. So the community rose up and, we're shooting off phone calls and emails to the authorities to try to figure out what the hell's going on and why is this happening. Well, it turns out that this has been going on for decades. Yeah, for about 30 years they've been doing this in various places around the world, particularly for moths, but the company that makes this, Valent Biosciences, has a whole bunch of concoctions, various insecticides and things they cook up to deal with all manner of insects, worms, larvae, and then they've got a whole array of fungicides and pesticides of every description, right? So after everyone in the community made contact or tried to with the authorities about this, well, they basically said, and I'll read you a conversation that was had by the Minister of Forests. So this is the decree to spray this stuff. Comes into every community. So everyone listening, please check your own area and look for the forest agencies, people who look after the forests, also Department of Agriculture, and even tourism. So the decisions to spray this stuff comes down from the top. It's all under the umbrella of UN Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, which include pest control. And the policies and decision making moves on down the food chain from there through an organization known as ICLEI. That's an acronym, and it stands for the International Council of Local Environmental Initiatives.
Okay.
And so decisions are made at the top. They are then passed on down to local governments, and the local governments then must obey. So this is where the orders come from. And so in the course of trying to figure out what is this stuff, why are they so hell-bent on doing it, I was down the rabbit hole and, of course, first went to Valent Biosciences, which makes this stuff. So this substance is composed of what is commonly known as BTK, Bacillus thuringiensis var. Kerstaki. So it's a bacteria, some kind of species strain of bacteria. Now, they're able to call it organic and suitable for organic farms because they find this bacteria in the soil. So apparently, according to them, if you find this in the soil, that automatically makes it organic, and that means you can spray it everywhere on humans, animals, you name it. It won't affect anything other than this particular moth. But this 4A48B is only composed of 13% BTK. The rest of the ingredients, the 87%, are undisclosed because it's proprietary. So we're not allowed to know what's in 87% of undisclosed ingredients. How about that?
Well, so, and that's fairly typical with these people, right?
It is, yeah.
We've had all different types. They don't tell you what's in them.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's basically the same program as with the injections. So it's a safe and effective. So, yeah, it's all safe and effective. Don't worry about the secret ingredients because they are representatives. They care about us so much that they've looked into it and they've decided that it's totally safe and not a problem.
Yeah, the company that's selling this stuff, billions of dollars worth, told them that it's safe and it's effective. They showed them their research that they paid for their product. We know how this game works, right?
That's right. Yeah. And so, of course, in the meantime, doing research, we found that, it's not safe and effective. There are all kinds of health impacts, largely having to do with eye problems. So if you're in the spray zone, eye problems, respiratory problems, gastrointestinal problems, No, no information that we've been able to get from authorities to show that this has been tested on anybody or anything. They just say safe and effective, no problem for animals or your organic garden.
Mhm.
So this little island is known like around the world as being a producer of certified organic produce, fruit, and animal products, meat. And so just because they say it's organic, that means they can spray this stuff on a place like this, where the farmers, it's a very rural farming community. And the farmers, make their money by having the certification, the organic certification, which is very expensive. And so people pay this extra money to get the certification for their produce and whatnot. And then the forces of evil go ahead and say, oh, yeah, you can spray this stuff and it's all organic and it's all safe and everything else. So this goes on. So despite all the resistance, they went ahead and sprayed, and they did it 3 times. 3 times. So apparently, in order to kill all the moth larvae or whatever it is they're going after, they have to spray it 3 times about 2 weeks apart. So meanwhile, we're raising questions, we're raising hell, trying to get them to stop this, like, what are you doing? And they went ahead and did it 3 times anyway. So just keep in mind, everyone listening, that this is probably happening somewhere near you. If you're near any forested areas, or
yeah. So Laura Lee, number one is that it sounds like you have a ghoul in the background. I think that's the road work that's going on in the backdrop.
Yeah, it's somebody. Is it really bad?
Well, it's not that bad, but I mean, if you have a window open that you can get closed, that'd be great.
Okay, maybe I. Oh dear.
But I wanted to bring this to people's attention. This is the National Institutes of Health, NIH, in the U.S. All right, I'm going to pull this up for them. This is from March 14th, 2003. Symptom complaints following aerial spraying with biological insecticide 4A48B. And so you go through this right here, and this was 292 residents within the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry of West Auckland spray zone were recruited by a door-to-door survey of homes with the most intensely sprayed area 10 weeks prior to the first aerial spray, and participants completed a symptom checklist and questionnaire measuring health perceptions. Symptoms reports. 3 months after the start of the spraying, 181 or 62% of the original participants responded to a similar post questionnaire. Symptoms reports, health perceptions, and visits to healthcare providers were compared between the baseline and the follow-up questionnaire. Rates of symptom complaints. Results. Symptom complaints increased significantly following the aerial spraying, in particular, sleep problems, dizziness, difficulty concentrated, irritated throat, itchy nose, diarrhea, stomach discomfort, gas discomfort. Conclusions, aerial spraying of 4A48B is associated with some adverse health consequences in terms of significant increases in upper gastrointestinal and neuropsychiatric symptoms, as well as a reduction in overall perception of health in the exposed population. Yeah. This is horrible. And you know what's crazy, Laura Lee, is that this is our governments that are taking taxpayer dollars to do this. And then people like you stand up, your whole community stands up and says, hey, no, we don't want this. And they say, well, we're doing it anyway. There has to be a methodology within the systems of government for when people rise up to a certain number of degree, like if a whole town or a congressional district is going to get sprayed with these types of things, and you have 10% come up and say, hey, stop. They have to be able to stop this shit, but they don't. They just move forward with it because, the Minister of Agriculture in Canada probably gets a kickback from the pharmaceutical companies, the insecticide companies that produce this. And that's what's really part and parcel of what's going on here. But
Oh
there's
yeah.
more to this 4A48B. There's more going
Oh
on
yeah.
than meets the eye.
It
I
sure
believe
is.
that these types of chemical sprayings are aligned with what we see with what's known as chemtrails, what we see with the
That's
aerial
right.
spraying.
Yes, that's exactly where I'm going with this,
All right.
and why I think it's so important for us to talk about this, because people can be in denial about the chemtrails.
Mhm.
The usual thing is, oh, they're just contrails. Oh, you're nuts. But when low flying planes are flying over your house, like these planes fly back and forth over the spray area, which usually amounts to, well, at least here I think it was 400 acres or something like that. But
Mhm.
these planes, they come in at 5:30 in the morning and they spray back and forth over this area for an hour to an hour and a half. Now, just think about the low flying plane issue. I
Mhm.
mean, that in and of itself. So the 20th century is replete with terrifying images of low flying planes dropping chemicals or bombs on innocent populations. I mean, if nothing else, it's really bad optics. And like, do they really need to spray it from airplanes? I don't think so. I think it's terror. It's terrorizing. That is
Mhm.
terrifying. I mean, no matter who you are or what you might think about all of this, if you have a low flying plane going back and forth over your house and your garden and your children um, for an hour and a half early in the morning, if nothing else, it certainly is going to upset your nervous system. I mean, that is just a terror. It's a terrible experience, and it does evoke terror. So that's one thing. Now, listen to. I'm going to just read you a very short conversation that was had by BC
Mhm.
with this Tim Ibata of BC Ministry of Forests. So this is Katrina, one of our community members, who actually got him on the phone. And she says, I find it hard to understand, Tim, that you are trying to justify the plan to spray our land and our children. How absurd that you are suggesting that a product that is 87% unknown to us and 12% highly concerning is safe. We will not comply with your unlawful schemes. So here's what he said. You had better get over it, and you will never know what they are spraying on you and your children. She says, are you sure you actually want to make that statement, Tim? That is a very dangerous thing to be saying out loud to me right now. And I assure you, I will make sure that statement is spread far and wide. Do you really want to say that again? Because I am recording this conversation. He says, yes, I do. You will never know what they are spraying on you, and you can tell your group they had better get over it. How about that? This is the
I would love to
minister.
get a copy of that recording.
It was not recorded audio. She was talking to him on speakerphone, and she invited two other people who were there. So she's got two witnesses.
Mm.
And yeah, but you're not allowed to record these government officials.
Oh, fuck,
So
you aren't. Well, in the United States, you can.
yeah, well, anyway, we got it, and this conversation has been spread far and wide to everyone who's been a part of looking into this. But I mean, that tells you something right there. First of all, if this little minion, Ibata, feels free to say something like that, you can rest assured that all his superiors further up the food chain um, agree, or he
Yeah.
would have been fired on the spot. So here's another interesting point. Why did they name it 4A? 48B.
Well, names are important, right?
They sure are. And
Names
it's
are
not,
representative of the symbolism of whatever that is.
absolutely. Yeah. And it does not appear to be an acronym. So here's the Oxford Dictionary definition of 4A. A hostile or predatory incursion, a raid, the advance guard of an army, to scour or ravage in search of booty, to make a raid or to pillage. So does that sound like something friendly and
No.
organic?
Not at all.
No, this is not about moss. This is a whole other thing to force us into submission, to generate fear, so that terrifying airplanes flying overhead, and to who knows what they're after here, and what is in the 87% unknown ingredients.
Well, you know what I found interesting? Number one is that its primary ingredient was a fungus. Number two is that the majority of the adverse effects from 4A, 48B appear to be gastrointestinal in nature. So when you introduce various different chemicals to your gut microbiome,
Yeah,
lots of different problems happen. Now, if you look at the
That's
United
right.
States, if you look at Canada, Western nations,
Yeah.
there's a lot of problems with inflammation. There's a lot of problems from inflammation causing other types of diseases. The onset
Yeah.
of all different types of diseases,
Mhm.
all string
Leaky gut.
along from your gut. That's right, leaky gut.
Right.
And so it sounds like this could be one of those factors at play.
Well, and
with
that's
this.
what it does to the moth, is that it destroys their digestive system. So it's it attacks that in the moth, and but it's safe and effective, though. Doesn't hurt humans. Oh, and it's organic. Yeah, it's organic because they obtain the bacteria from the soil, and then they, what they call, culture it. Okay. Oh yeah, that sounds good. So they culture it in the lab with their 87% secret ingredients, and basically it's genetically modified. So what's going on is that they're reproducing it, right? They're culturing the substance, the bacteria, and who knows what they're using to cause it to, grow and reproduce, so they can make it by the ton and sell it for hundreds of millions of dollars, right?
Right. I mean, so for everybody out there, and I've looked at this for a very long time, and a few things.
Have you heard of this before, though? Have you heard?
Yes, I've heard of 4A, 48B. So
okay,
there's a few points here that for people to understand. Number one is that aerial spraying has been going on for a very long time. What we call chemtrails is aerial spraying programs.
Yeah.
They dump various different types of metallic particulates into the atmosphere. Aluminum and other small metals were actually added to airline fuels or to jet fuel to help it in the sense of the combustion at higher altitudes. So that does get exhausted when those airliners and jets and stuff like that are flying. Then we have John Brennan in 2012 talking about the various different aerial spraying campaigns and chemtrail campaigns. They didn't call them chemtrails, but that's exactly what he was talking about. We have just recently, MIT did an experiment where they shot metallic particulates into the atmosphere that tried to refract various parts of the sun, and they were very successful at it. Bill Gates has been heavily invested in this. And then since the end of World War I, and I don't know if people know the history of insecticides, the largest insecticide on the planet during World War I or prior to World War I up to World War I was nicotine, which, by the way, nicotine is rather harmless to human beings. It's nicotinamide. It's a neurotransmitter that you produce in your body in the sense of that receptor. After World War I, what actually happened is you had DuPont, you had IG Farben, you had all these companies that were producing biological and chemical weapons for the militaries during World War I. Well, now there's no war. So they come up and they start making millions of dollars, billions of dollars producing chemicals, and now there's no war and they're going out of business. So what do? Well, they transition. They create this whole hype of commercial farming. They start consolidating all the farmland throughout at least the United States. I mean, we look at 1929, 80% of all farms in the United States were family owned and were partitioned farms, in the sense that they weren't one primary crop, but they were all family owned. After the great stock market crash and the Great Depression, all of that got consolidated, because what happened during the stock market crash, for people who want an education on this, is the bankers had created the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve was printing cheap money, very, very low interest rates. It was handing that down to lower banks and distributing it. Well, the small hometown banks, which accounted for 60 to 80% of all banks in the United States, were family-owned hometown banks. Nobody wanted the money. Everybody was doing fine. But we enter a period known as the Roaring 20s. And what happened with the Roaring 20s is they reduced the interest rate almost to zero on loans. So a farmer could come in and the banker would be like, hey, I got $20,000 to give you. You owe me 0.01% interest. And all you have to do is just sign here. And the farmer's like, oh, things are going good. I could use the $20,000, expand my farm, buy a few acres. And they would collateralize their farms, which were family owned and paid off, and a portion of the price. And they would do that for 10 years. Well, eventually what happened is the bankers crashed the market and called in all the loans through the Federal Reserve. Yeah. And all those banks went belly up, and all those assets went to the bigger banks, and they called in the collateralization, and they took all those farms. This is one of the main reasons that the Great Depression happened. It's because nobody was running the farms. So we have this consolidation of farmland, and then the commercialization of farmland begins to come in. And this is where you introduce like DuPont and IG Farben and all these other chemical insecticides that start getting sprayed onto the crops. And it goes on. This is why we had DDT in the 1950s, right? Yeah. So these companies find that, hey, we're out of the business of biological warfare, chemical warfare. Let's get into the business of chemical warfare and biological warfare, but go after insects and predatory species. And so they do, but the problem is the establishment back in that day of the National Institutes of Health and these various other organizations, the FDA, didn't have the large oversight on those chemical companies to understand what the long-term effects were on human beings, on the food supply, on regional animals and insects and other things like that. So this is where the realm of genetic modification comes in, the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. And things begin to ramp up. But what happens during that time? We get massive amounts of people coming up with health problems that normally didn't have health problems. In 1972, wheat was the first genetically modified crop. And then this is followed by soybeans in 78 and corn in the late 80s. And then this moves on. And since that time frame, we've had an epidemic of obesity and people of unhealthy habits, and especially massive amounts of gut disease. But the reason that these crops were genetically modified was so that they wouldn't die when the insecticides were actually sprayed on them. So they're not genetically modified for you. They're genetically modified for various different chemicals that are being sprayed onto them. This is like Ready Roundup. Yeah. You go and spray Ready Roundup, it would actually kill the crop. So they genetically modified it so it would not attack the Ready Roundup, and the Ready Roundup wouldn't kill the plant. And so it actually stores portions of that Ready Roundup inside the crop itself because of that genetic modification. This is what those industries have created and done for a very long time. And the problem then another problem comes about, is that the federal agencies that go for oversight and regulation on these things, they hire the experts in the field. So they're hiring directly from the various different pharmaceutical and chemical companies to bring them in as the experts, to then do the oversight on the companies they once worked for and will work for again after the next administration is over. And so it's this big loop of shit on the people of the world. But I think that there's also a larger conspiracy going on. Now, Laura Lee, I've been looking into this for a very long time. Okay. My thoughts are that planet Earth is being terraformed. Yeah. That humanity is being slowly eliminated over time. to make it look like our fault, bad decisions, all these things, and that the planet is being slowly terraformed. They're removing various different species. They're clearing out very different parts of land. They're changing the atmosphere. They're changing the weather patterns. That the whole aspect of global warming isn't necessarily truthful, but is being utilized to drive a larger agenda of terraforming this planet to a more comfortable climate for something else. And I think that there's other parts that we're seeing right now that are being introduced into the aerial spraying. And I would call that you remember back in the 90s, people were getting more Morgellons?
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember listening to Coast to Coast back in the day, and people were talking about Morgellons disease. And if people have never seen this, they have like little fibers that'll grow out of their skin. And they tested the fibers, and they found that it was a silicon-based fiber that appeared to be very receptive to external stimulus, which means that, in a sense, it was alive. And they claimed it was a silicon-based life form. But that doesn't really exist in nature, so that means that they were calling it nanotechnology. So this means that something was falling from the sky or being added to these aerial sprays that, in the sense, could be not genetically modified, but nanotechnology or smart dust. And we know that the DARPA and the Department of Defense here in the United States have developed these things called smart dust, where they can create nanoscopic circuits of nanobots that can replicate themselves, and they can spray them in the air, and they can go into your body. They can monitor different systems, and they'll exhaust themselves, and they'll reproduce themselves. There was a great show about in 2012. I think it was on NBC or ABC, called Revolution. And what it was a DARPA scientist had created a nanotechnology that inhibited electrical currents. And so what happened is they released it, and it replicated itself, and it inhibited all of the electrical frequencies on the planet. So nobody had electricity, and things were falling out of the sky, and nobody could figure out what happened, and they couldn't shut off the nanotech. This is the type of technology they have now. This is the type of stuff that they have. And this stuff is, and I hate to say it, is in our bodies. It's in our food. It is.
Yeah, I think it also has something to do with this Internet of Things. And so, again, the big question that I posed, and I posed to the authorities in the emails that I was sending around, and the question is this: does any government, agency, official, or anyone else have the right or the legal authority to spray unknown chemicals on an unwilling population who does not have informed consent? That I would like to see that question posed everywhere. I tried to get some of the, like, couple of little local newspapers, online newspapers. I reached out to every alternative media person that I could think of in my area. No response. Nobody responded. I mean, I thought this is like the biggest story ever. Like, hey folks, we're being sprayed with this chemical. Nobody knows really what it is. Shouldn't we all be alarmed?
Yeah.
But no response, and no response from any of the so-called representatives, except the usual kind of BS little form things that they send out. Oh yeah, we really care about your concerns, and we'll get back to you as soon as we get it all figured out. Nothing has happened since. They did their spraying, and not only here, right? There were, I think it was somewhere between 12 and maybe more communities just in BC. But this is going on everywhere. And I just, again, would encourage everyone listening, look into your area. the forests, the agriculture, and tourism, because it turns out that it's what they call stakeholders that determine whether this happens or not. So the stakeholders in this area are the lumber industry and tourism. Yeah, because tourists don't like to see a bunch of, defoliated trees. So who owns the land then? It's not us. Even if you own your property and your organic farm that you pay, high value for, you don't own it. They're going to spray on you whether you like it or not.
It's just an extension of the plantation.
Yeah, that's right. And I think you're onto something there, Josh, with the terraforming and what it's so insane what they're doing, and so anti-life that you really gotta wonder what's going on here, and how do we resist? This is the other thing, because they don't pay any attention to our concerns. The other piece of this that's very interesting, related to the likes of Valent Biosciences, is that they are affiliated with a Japanese chemical company called Sumitomo. Now, Sumitomo is into all kinds of interesting things, including pharma products. So you start digging into these corporations, and whatever it is they're cooking up in terms of what they describe as biorationals. So they call these substances, it's their new fancy name, it's biorationals. And they talk about it like it's the best thing ever. So their marketing goes along the lines of, well, we know that, pesticides are bad, and pesticides have been bad for people. And so now we at Sumitomo, or whoever it is, we care about the people in the land so much that we've developed these organic treatments, and they call it biorationals. So now there's a whole raft of different companies that are cooking up these so-called biorationals, which are basically doing the same thing that Valent Biosciences is doing, is that they obtain a substance from the earth and then they culture it. So somehow that makes it organic. And then they can sell it as safe and effective, and that it's totally organic, and nothing to see here, go home. And that's pretty much where it's left. And there's just like a stone wall trying to get any information about it. Now, Josh, with regards to all the smart dust, I sent you a video, a Greg Reese video, that really encapsulates this whole thing.
Greg Reese is good. Let's listen to this.
He's awesome. Yeah.
For decades, those with eyes to see have been aware of chemtrails in our skies. And for decades, we were called conspiracy theorists. But in 2016, while serving as director of the CIA, John Brennan admitted that chemtrails are real at the Council on Foreign Relations.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection. or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. An SAI program could limit global temperature increases, reducing some risks associated with higher temperatures and providing the world economy additional time to transition from fossil fuels. This process is also relatively inexpensive. The National Research Council estimates that a fully deployed SAI program would cost about $10 billion yearly.
In 2007, it was announced that nano-sized particles, known as smart dust, can be dispersed over the battlefield via aerial spraying. The military has contracted several multinational corporations to develop wearable biosensors. Biosensors and smart dust can become something known as body dust that can spread inside the human body as an active network, capable to provide telemetry from inside the body for the use of monitoring humans. There is a patent for using polyethylene glycol derivatives as a way to modify the weather, the same substances used in the COVID-19 lipid nanoparticles. These polymers can be integrated with biosensors and soft robotics for smart materials, materials that can be modified by external stimuli. Soft robotics is a subfield of robotics that utilizes compliant materials rather than rigid ones, such as the hydrogels found in the experimental COVID shots. DuPont is manufacturing elastomers for fast-moving soft robots and have developed the fastest DEA-driven soft robots ever reported, designed for biosensing, interacting with biological entities, and actuating on a cellular level. In her recent article, Smart Dust, Biosensors, Polymers for Geoengineering, and the Multinational Corporations that Manufacture Them, Dr. Anna Maria Mielchia points out that these are the transhumanist technologies that will be giving AI enormous amounts of data, as Bill Gates said, to understand 100 trillion organisms. She also points out the important fact that the elastomers being fabricated by DuPont for this soft robot technology are made of the exact same chemicals found when analyzing the messegens, a compound that displays liquid crystal properties, found in targeted individuals. And they appear to be the same compounds she found in the blood of the vaxxed, as well as the blood of the unvaxxed, which appear to be the same structures used as part of electronic circuitry in self-assembly nanotechnology. Smart Dust is a system of tiny microelectromechanical systems that can detect light, temperature, vibration, magnetism, or chemicals. They are operated wirelessly on a computer network, can be used for medical or military surveillance purposes, and can be dispersed through the air via chemtrails, which would greatly go unnoticed by the sleeping masses who have come to accept them. When combined with the Messenger soft robot technology, which has already been found in several blood samples of unwitting victims, they could create a means of monitoring and controlling the entire human population. Reporting for InfoWars, this is Greg Reese.
Wow. It's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, and super scary. So,
we've been waiting for technology to catch up, and all of a sudden it's here, and we're like, whoa, slow down.
Well, and guess what? DuPont is affiliated with Sumitomo. So, Sumitomo, affiliated with Baylor Biosciences, DuPont, a part of them. They're into pharma as well. So, is this stuff, this nano dust, is that what's in this 4A48B and all the other insecticides and pesticides that are being sprayed around against the will of the people? And, of course, the chemtrails. So, I think that, again, because having this happen, so on the ground and in your face, like I say, the chemtrails, they're high up, it's easy to say, well, that's not really going on. But when you have a low-flying plane and you can see the stuff coming out of the plane and falling on your garden, that's a little harder to deny.
Mm.
So my feeling is that if we can get people, first of all, aware of this, because it is happening everywhere, and just, check around wherever you happen to live. Look at your forest, Department of Forests, Department of Agriculture, tourism, and also be on the lookout for this ICLEI, because it's in every local government.
Mm.
And that's where the orders come from to spray this stuff. And to do a whole lot of other things too that are ordered via the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So this issue of the 4A48B is something that I think just about anybody can get behind, especially if it is happening in your community. Now, there are other chemicals or insecticides and pesticides that are made by these companies that are not sprayed from airplanes, but they do spray them like on the ground. So they'll have a truck and, somebody in a hazmat suit that'll be spraying the bushes or whatever. And see, supposedly there's a set of regulations that have to be fulfilled before this is allowed. And a contract, in the contract to spray, there's stipulations. You have to provide the people with, 2 weeks notice. You have to send postcards around to everyone in the spray area. You have to go even door to door to make sure everybody knows that this is happening. And if there's people who might be sensitive to this, they ask them to leave town. It's safe and effective, though.
Leave town, but then come back and let your baby crawl around, on the kitchen floor or outside and play in the grass. It'll be fine after a few weeks because, that's one thing about our ignorance as human beings is that, they'll be like, like you said, oh, give it a few days and it'll all clear out and you'll be fine and you can go back in there, like those insect bombs that you do in your house or, the stuff that you spray your plants. But does it really? That stuff doesn't break down. It's not going away. It's staying right there. There was a few studies done about over a decade ago about the kitchen floor, about using the various different chemicals on your kitchen floor to mop your kitchen floor and how they actually become breeding grounds for various different types of funguses and bacteria, that bleach itself actually helps harbor them. And that when you have an infant crawling around on your kitchen floor or your living room floor, they're being riddled with all these bacteria and funguses, and that what you're using to clean actually isn't cleaning shit.
Right. Yeah. So this is a very significant issue. And the good news is that at least it is getting some airtime in that, like I say, I didn't know this was going on. And I'm somebody who's pretty deep into all of this kind of stuff.
Right.
And it was happening right here in my own little island. And I didn't know that this was happening and that it's been going on for years. So apparently the way this works, and I suspect that it's a computer model. So they get a computer model. It's just like the same thing that they did for the International Panel on Climate Change, right? They make a computer model, and then the computer model says, "Oh my God, this is the end of the world if we don't get rid of our CO2," and then the orders go out from there, and there's no questioning. Well, it's probably the same thing here.
Mm-hmm.
That they determine that okay, as soon as 14 moths show up because they leave tracks. So they spray, and then they leave traps out, and in the fall they come and collect the traps to see how many moths are in there. And apparently, if they find 14 some odd moths, well, that's it. You got to spray from an airplane now, and that's everywhere. I mean, so it's a one size fits all. The computer model says do this if this happens, and you have no recourse because
Well,
even
right,
these,
but also that testing's done by your government, but the regulations upon that testing were lobbied for by these companies. These companies said, "Hey, that this is the standard. If there's 14 moths in the fall, then we got to spray in the spring." And this is the legislation you need to pass to do this. It gets passed, and that keeps them with that revenue window unlocked as long as that regulation stays in place.
Yeah. Well, and I noticed in some of the chat questions that are showing up, the spraying for mosquitoes. So they don't use 4A48B, but Valent Biosciences does make some sprays for mosquitoes as well. So I mean, they're into everything.
Oh, don't even get me started with mosquitoes.
Yeah. Well, now they have genetically modified mosquitoes. Yeah, great.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Do you know about that? So the starting of so mosquitoes have actually been utilized in biowarfare since the times of ancient Egypt.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that.
They absolutely have. There was various different plans during World War II to utilize mosquitoes to kill off the Germans, and then during the Cold War, in the early parts of the Cold War, they wanted to use them to kill off the Russians to see if they could actually give them various different types of viruses or flus. In 1978, the Central Intelligence Agency went to India, and they went to a small province in northern India that had 0 cases of yellow fever. And what they did is they introduced an invasive mosquito species that they had genetically modified to carry yellow fever. And they had released it into this region, and a whole bunch of people got sick. The problem is that people found out what had happened, and they kicked the Central Intelligence Agency out of India. And what was her name? Indira Gandhi, who was Gandhi's wife, who was the prime minister of India at the time, was actually fired and cooked for this shit. She was actually prosecuted by the people in this area because of this. So the genetic modification now is taking a different turn. Instead, what they're saying is, hey, there's too many mosquitoes. They carry too many airborne disease or disease-borne illnesses. We have to stop them. So there's a company out there called Oxitec. And what Oxitec began doing in the early 2000s was genetically modifying male mosquitoes. So male mosquitoes are incredibly important to the ecosystem. So we know that bees are one of the number one pollinators on the planet. They carry the pollen from this plant to this plant, and they help to spread and keep the ecosystem alive. Male mosquitoes are number 2. Male mosquitoes are the number 2 pollinator on the planet. I didn't know this until I started researching.
No, that's amazing.
Yeah. And male mosquitoes, by the way, don't bite you. And so people out there, if you ever seen that really long mosquito with the long legs and the long thing in the face, it can't bite you. That's a male mosquito. But they are the number 2 pollinator on the planet. Well, in the early 2000s, Oxitec began shifting around with a modification of the D7 protein in the male mosquito saliva. And what this did is when the male mosquito would go mate with the female mosquitoes, it would genetically modify the female mosquito's saliva protein. Now, the D7 protein is kind of interesting. The D7 protein in mosquitoes is what causes your arm to swell up when you get bit. The mosquitoes actually are helping you when that happens. So it would be really bad for nature to design something that kills its host. Every time it bites it, it kills its host, right? Female mosquitoes, they need blood. Every time they bit something, they killed it, that's a bad thing for nature. So nature designed this protein, D7 protein, that when a mosquito bites you, the saliva with the D7 protein goes into the host body. It produces an immediate inflammatory response but that inflammatory response blocks the uptake of viruses, bacteria, and fungus from the mosquito into the host.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So in the early 2000s, Oxitec began working with that genetic modification. Like, hey, seems mosquitoes already have something that is preventing diseases. Let's mess with it. Well, recently we've seen a lot of people getting big welts. They call the Skeeter syndrome, right? Big welts. People are getting sick. We're seeing dengue. We're seeing yellow fever. We're seeing malaria. We're seeing all different types of stuff. It was in the early 2000s that they began modifying the D7 protein. One thing that they did is they removed the molecular safeguards. So every time a mosquito bites you now, it's kind of a pinwheel of whether that virus can be uploaded into your body or not. You got to remember, they wanted to take mosquitoes and utilize them as weapons in warfare. And Bill Gates is behind Oxitec, and he's also behind that. Bill Gates was talking about utilizing mosquitoes to spread vaccines. I'm not shitting you here. Okay.
I know. I remember him talking about it.
So when we look at how they genetically modify the male mosquito, they send billions of them off and let them go mate. Well, you're going to have to take some time before that can actually have some type of ramification. I found out that time frame is about 3.5 years. What we've seen is 3.5 years after every place that they've released these mosquitoes that are genetically modified, and they're differently genetically modified now, but the D7 protein was modified in the early 2000s, and I believe that's the same mosquitoes that they're using. But 3.5 years after, we're finding various regional epidemics that are occurring of whether it's dengue, malaria, yellow fever, bubonic plague that are being carried by mosquitoes. We saw this in South America. We saw this in Central America. And a few years ago, I said, watch, you're going to see this in Florida. You're going to see this in Florida because they released 3.5 billion male mosquitoes in the Key West area of Florida. Now, what do we have? They just had 27 cases of dengue fever in New Jersey that came from people traveling to where? Florida. What happened? They were down in South Florida. South Florida's had various different cases of dengue fever over the last couple months. Exactly what I'm saying. You're going to have regional outbreaks. Instead of one big pandemic, you're going to see all these small little epidemics everywhere. And what they're doing is they're targeting the people with the immune systems that are already immunosuppressed. And so now those people will start falling off because they got bit by a mosquito, they get sick, so on and so forth. So the mosquito thing is a conspiracy in itself.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Well, and on the immuno suppressed people as a consequence of the poison shots, we've got, massive numbers of people now with immune deficiencies and suffering already. So then you add that in, and then if their story is, oh, well, we got these terrible bugs, so now we have to spray whatever from an airplane.
Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting topic, and it's definitely one that I think we should research more on for the Red Pill Project and the audience out there. I hope that they do delve into these topics. We were just talking about earlier yesterday. We're going to start do a show like this on school shooters and the utilization of SSRIs on school shooters. So that's going to be an interesting topic too. Laura Lee, I'm curious. Can you give us an astrology update on the things that you have witnessed and seen, and maybe what's coming? We got November coming in the United States. It's a very, very big election. A lot of things happening. What are your thoughts on what's going on in the world?
Well, oh boy, that's lots of big stuff. The main thing that's coming up that we should be watching is on July the 15th. There's going to be a Mars-Uranus conjunction in Taurus, and that conjunction will be also connected with a fixed star called Algol, A-L-G-O-L.
Mm-hmm.
So here are some things to note with regards to Algol. It's associated with things like violence, decapitation, hanging, electrocution, mob violence, sudden assaults, military attacks, explosions, and assassinations. So that's pretty interesting right there. So it starts on the 15th of July, the whole combination, and it's going to be in operation into the next day, the 16th, because on the 16th, the moon will be in Scorpio, and the moon will oppose that configuration, the Mars-Uranus-Algol combination. So those 2 days, I would say, are going to be very significant in terms of just the state of the world. A couple of other interesting things, just the Mars-Uranus combination. So Mars is the god of war in mythology, and Uranus rules things, sudden unexpected events, sudden changes. It's associated with volcanoes and earthquakes in astrology. So these kinds of sudden, unexpected, often violent changes in whatever's going on. Now, this conjunction is happening in the sign of Taurus. Taurus overall is related to finances. So perhaps this is going to be connected with some, wild thing happening in the financial realm, which certainly wouldn't be a surprise considering everything that's going on.
Right.
But also the incredibly volatile situation just in the world at large, with all this warmongering and just the foe, seem absolutely hell-bent on getting a war going. And there just seems to be no resistance to this. It's really shocking. Plus, all the things that are happening politically. So, Joe Biden, his chart is pretty interesting with regards to this configuration, lining up in an exact opposition to his sun in Scorpio. So that's pretty relevant, I'd say. And Donald Trump also has his midheaven, which is associated with work, career, professional aspirations, and goals. Donald Trump's midheaven is at 24 degrees of Taurus, and this conjunction is taking place at 26 degrees. Donald Trump also has his Mars at 26 plus degrees of Leo, so it's making an exact square, a 90-degree aspect, which is a challenging aspect. So both of these individuals have this powerful configuration landing in very significant places in their personal charts. So what does that mean? Well, I don't know, but it sure looks like there's some political fireworks on the way. I mean, it's already pretty wild what's going on the political reality show.
Yeah.
But this coming up is pretty significant, and obviously something we want to be watching for. Some historical connections to this particular conjunction are also very interesting. So the last time Mars, Uranus, and Algol were conjunct was on March the 1st, 1942. On March the 1st, 1942, there was a major naval defeat in the Java Sea, where the Japanese took out a couple of British Navy ships. So that's pretty interesting. And what else was going on that day? I think there was a stock market. Oh no, March 1st, 1942, Auschwitz was established.
Oh.
So just, thinking of the kind of archetypal energy that is associated with these kinds of planetary alignments. So when we're looking at that kind of stuff, we want to be thinking of the planets as representing the equivalent of forces of nature. It's like the astrological weather. So when powerful alignments like this show up, then it's a real heads up. Not only at the personal level, because this is obviously going to be affecting people in their personal lives as well. And depending on where this alignment shows up in your personal chart, then that's something to pay attention to if anybody who's got planetary planets in their own chart at 26 degrees of Taurus or the other fixed signs. But for the world, in considering the state of the world at the moment, this is looking pretty scary.
Well, it is, and I mean, I've talked about this at length. That
you have
NATO,
actually,
yeah, NATO's instigating Russia into war, and I mean, the British Prime Minister just authorized the use of missiles inside Russia. We have F-16s on the way to Ukraine.
Yeah.
It's not going to last very much longer. Something is going to pop off very, very shortly, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happens in the next 3 to 4 days with this astrological alignment, because that is when these things occur.
Yeah. I know. So it's heating up, and of course building up to the big election, which, if it happens at all, which at this point, who knows, then election day looks like amazingly good for Donald Trump based on his chart. But what does not look good for the Donald is Inauguration Day. Which is, now that's the 20th of the month, isn't it? 20th of January, is that usually when they, yeah. So that does not look like a good day for him. So thinking in terms of what might we expect, I think there's already been some pretty astute speculation on this, that, it's likely that if there is an election, I think that's still up for grabs at the moment, that they won't even be able to pull off a steal this time, because it's just going to be so overwhelmingly obvious that Donald Trump is
too many eyes are watching.
Right. Yeah. But then in the interim, from actual election day to inauguration is probably when the shit's really going to hit the fan.
That's what I said. I mean, we're going to have Red October, the October surprise, between August, September, October, November. It is going to be off the hook. So I'm hoping everybody's paying attention. It's going to get crazy. And I think we should have you back on during that time so we can look at the charts and kind of compare to see what's actually happening. For everybody out there, Laura Lee, if you want to visit Laura Lee, redpills.tv/Laura Lee. redpills.tv/Laura Lee. That is on the screen. You can see that. Laura Lee, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that always in looking at these astrological alignments, I mean, this is a big one, very significant, this one coming up, but also to be paying attention to the new moons and the full moons. I would just recommend that for everyone, because it helps us be in alignment with the cosmos and the nature of the life force, really.
Well, in the true cycles of who we are, right?
That's right.
More resonating with our circadian rhythms.
Hmm. Yeah, and emotional rhythms. Because obviously all of this stuff that's happening is extremely traumatizing. So this brings in the whole psychological warfare component of all of this. And I would say that all of the 4A, 48B, and why did they call it 4A? I mean, why did they call the COVID variant that came around in last September, why did they call it Eris, the goddess of war, violence, conflict? So this is psychological warfare. It's the use of language, and it's so the use of language could really be thought of as casting spells. It's a spell to use language like this. You know, to call it 4A, and most people wouldn't connect the dots there.
You know, it's interesting looking at that National Institute of Health response there, where they're talking about the adverse effects of 4A, 48B, because the conclusion, it talked about the increase in health consequences in terms of significant increases in upper airway, gastrointestinal, but then it said neuropsychiatric symptoms.
Yeah.
And that wasn't actually listed within the results section. So neuropsychiatric, I mean, you had concentrating problems, sleep problems, dizziness, difficulty concentrating. But neuropsychiatric to me sounds like mood alterations, emotional alterations, those types of things.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So we are being attacked at that level. And of course, the vaccines and that whole agenda also is attacking the brain, as Dr. Michael Mills writes about in great detail in his book, The Indoctrinated Brain. It's an attack on the hippocampus. And there's another psychologist who's been on the scene doing the circuit lately. It's Dr. Hughes, Dr. David Hughes. And he's also emphasizing the use of psychological warfare and how important it is for all of us, the people, to understand this part of the war, that the best weapon they've ever been able to cook up is the psychological warfare. And that, to a large extent, is what keeps us traumatized. And if you're traumatized, then you're not able to think clearly.
Well, and so then go back to what you just said about spells. Go back to about casting spells. I mean, in actuality, I mean, we create our own reality, so it has to be cast upon us, and the thoughts have to be seeded and planted within us by somebody else. It's really kind of what that's all about. It's an aspect of psychological warfare.
Mm-hmm. But the psychological warfare doesn't work if people know it's going on.
That's right.
So that's why having discussions like this and spreading the word and letting other people know about things like this and just posing the questions like, okay, they're calling this 4A 48B. Well, now why did they name it that? Because even people who don't really pay attention and don't know much about that gives one pause. Like it's and something that has to do with an advancing army, a raid, to scour and ravage. Yeah,
well, I mean,
that
you know where the
doesn't
word
sound friendly.
Well, think about the word pray. People pray to God, pray to God, pray to God. But what does an eagle do to a mouse? It preys on it.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
Think about the word church. It's Gaelic for kirk. Kirk comes from the Greek word Circe, or Greek goddess Circe, who was a goddess who would come out of the cave every 1,000 years and lure men into her cave and then devour their souls. A lot of the words in the English language are not what people think they actually are.
Yeah.
We worship God, right? We worship God, but then what floats out at sea, in the ocean? The U.S. Navy, when they sail what? Warships.
Yeah.
I mean, we gotta realize that our language has been hijacked, and I think that this is why 6,000 years ago, the two predominant languages were the languages of Sumerian, as well as the Vedic languages, right? Sanskrit, which in Hebrew, which are three of the most complex languages on the planet. Each individual letter has a book that can be written about the explanation of them. They all have mathematical and numerical connotations to them, as well as
and
spiritual
cymatic.
Cymatic.
Right. Yeah.
And cymatic. And why have we de-evolved? So we're coming out of caves and starting agriculture, and we have the most advanced languages on the planet, and we de-evolve from language over the next 5,000 years. It makes no sense unless the de-evolution of language was truly what was meant to come about, was the Tower of Babel, if you want to look at it like that.
Yeah. Well, and the casting of a spell that put people into a trance. And just my ongoing process over the last several years following the COVID hysteria, it is just like, how is it that so many people drank the Kool-Aid and are still drinking it? I mean, I see people here where I live in the middle of the summer wearing masks outside.
Kool-Aid tastes good, Laura Lee. That's why ignorance is bliss.
Ignorance is bliss to the ill-informed until they experience the
ramifications. And there's people out there that are waking up to this. I know many of them that are waking up, and they understand now what is really going on, and they're seeing, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that. You were right, or someone else is right? But I think that we're coming to this precipice moment, and I think that it's a conscious evolution is what is happening right now. The evolution of consciousness, the spiritual awakening, I think they're all the same thing, but I think that humanity is waking up to the fact that our reality is a veil that has been pulled down over our eyes, and that we are living in a great deception, in a great lie. And that our objective is to defeat the illusion, to bring about the true nature of reality, of who and what we truly are. And I think that is what we're working towards right now.
Yeah. And the reaching into the life force of the universe. And that is the healing as well. So all the advances in natural forms of healing. So, as I like to say, things are getting better and better and worse, faster and faster. And so as things get worse, then it really pushes those of us who are awake and who are asking questions and seeking the truth, that we will discover the way to not be affected by these weapons that are raged against us. The chemicals, the whatever. Because evil can't create on its own. So we are the creators. We are in alignment with the life force of the universe, the creative process of life. And as long as we, the people, are in alignment with that and reaching out to that, then we will find the healing that will keep us safe from whatever it is that they're rolling out. Because I think, and I think you do too, that they're unleashing everything now. They're emptying their bag of tricks.
No holds barred.
They're emptying their bag of tricks, and because they're afraid that they know that we know, and so they're stepping on the gas. It's like, uh-oh, we better hurry up and, crush these little bugs before they really understand what's happening and before they rise up en masse and put a stop to it. The thing that's always been confounding to me is that we are many and they are few. How is it that this few bunch of psychopaths have been able to pull this off?
Oh, psychological warfare.
Yeah, exactly. But once we realize, we're all victims of psychological warfare. And so those of us who are, talking about these things are like the ones who have been in the cult and realize that we're in the cult and are trying to warn the others who are still drinking the Kool-Aid to help them find their way out. And I mean, even though it's looking pretty scary at times these days, I still feel positive that evil destroys itself in the end, and there will be a new age of men, but it's going to be pretty wild over the next couple of years as all these transitions, these astrological alignments shift and move into their new processes, which is going to be taking place over the next 2 years. And looking particularly to July of 2025. So we've got a lot of powerful stuff happening now in July. Next year, there will be Saturn will have moved out of Pisces. Both Saturn and Neptune will have moved out of Pisces, and they will make a conjunction at almost 2 degrees of Aries on the 13th of July 2025. So Aries is the first sign of the zodiac and represents the energy of the sprouting seed, the energy of new life. And Pisces, where these two planets are currently working and finishing up their transit through that sign, is the last sign of the zodiac. So what's happening right now, that is through this year and into next year, we're doing cleanup. It's cleanup of the old dead stuff, the stuff that has been laying around, the debris that has been laying around for the last 165 years, which is the Neptune cycle, and Saturn, which is a roughly 30-year cycle. And by following the Saturn cycles back, we can get a sense of what kinds of things are being presented. And it's very, especially right now, comparison to what was happening in the mid-1960s. It's very similar. Saturn was in Pisces then, along with a Uranus-Pluto conjunction. But the processes right now related to Saturn and Neptune being in Pisces is really a reevaluation of what has happened over the last cycle. In this case, for Saturn, 30 years, and then roughly 60 years, and then 165 years concerning Neptune. So contained within that period of time, all the processes that have been evolving through those cycles are now coming to closure. So we're dealing with a lot of closure now. Closure of long cycles and the completion of the entire zodiac with regards to Neptune. So that's a big deal. Yeah, it's like the end, and then they make a conjunction in Aries. There's the new beginning. So I would say, to be watching for a major new beginning coming next July. But from now to then, and I think the harbinger of what we can expect to be dealing with over the next year is evident with this Mars-Uranus-Algol conjunction. it's like that's sort of the explosion that blows the doors off. And and we're going to be doing cleanup and just trying to manage the destruction that it's already taking place. I mean,
It is, and it's been crazy, and it's going to get much crazier. And we all know that it doesn't end in November, it doesn't end in January. This continues to go on because we have Agenda 2030, Agenda 2050, and they're going to persist. And there's going to be a lot of things transitioning and changing. The question is who's going to be in control of those transitions and changes, and that's what we're fighting for right now. So it is going to be one hell of a show, people. Buckle up, hold your shoes, Dorothy, because Kansas is going bye-bye.
Yeah.
Laura Lee, fantastic having you on. I appreciate you coming on. Guys, redpills.tv/Laura Lee if you want to go visit her. We're gonna bring David on in a few weeks. He had something come up last minute, so he couldn't make it tonight. But me, Laura Lee, and David, we're going to join together, and we're going to talk more extensively on smart dust, on 48B, and various other topics like this in the sense of psychological warfare. So I'm looking forward to that as well. But Laura Lee, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming on.
Oh, always a joy. Always a joy to talk to you, Josh, and your wonderful audience.
Awesome. And guys, I'm going to Fringe After Dark on the Social Red Pill, socialredpill.com. You can find that out there, socialredpill.com. And then on there, you go to Fringe After Dark or Fringe After Show. I will be on in about 15 minutes, however long it takes me to cook a steak, about 15 minutes. I'll see you guys over there on the Zoom. Much love, respect. God bless. Take care. Have a great night. See you guys next time.
Bye, everyone.
Spoon, that's impossible. Only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.